If you'd like to purchase Magic Online cards with event tickets while logged in on Magic Online, look at Mtgo Academy's selection by trading our official bot, Academy Sellbot. You can find it in the Magic Online trading area or add it to your buddy list.
Okay, here we are, round 4 of the Vintage Daily event. After the disappointing results for round 3, we are in a must-win situation in order to get some prizes here. And unfortunately, we are playing matched up against Shockwave X. Shockwave has always played standstill decks. I don't think I've ever seen him play anything other than a standstill deck, and I think it's a pretty poor matchup for this deck. This is more of a kind of a combo workshop deck than a lockdown workshop deck, and so the combo portion of it can be a little bit slow because Forge Master itself is kind of slow. If you can get the Forge Master out through some counter magic, then I guess it can work. But really, the best way to attack a standstill deck is to be aggressive or lock them out of being able to do anything. So noting that this is kind of a poor matchup for us. So our opening hand is kind of strong. We have some really so we got some good acceleration. So we have no lock pieces other than a Revoker, which at this point really we can only name a Jace. But it's not worth pitching back. So our opponent leads off with the Mishra's Factory. We draw a Lodestone Golem, which is nice because we can play turn 1 Golem off of Black Lotus, which is really nice. That was probably the best draw we could have had, and it kind of plays into the much more aggressive and lockdown pieces of part of the games, where we actually might be able to get an upper hand. So our opponent plays Volcanic Island and simply passes the turn. At this point, we can start playing some of our mana pieces, either the Metalworker and or the Sol Ring, but our Sol Ring is met by a Mental Misstep. So instead, we're going to play Thorn of Amethyst, potentially hope to kind of lock him out a little bit more, and attack with Lodestone Golem. So we've got him down to 13, but he draws a Strip Mine to get rid of our Ancient Tomb, which now leaves us in a precarious position where we aren't able to cast any of the spells that we have unless we draw land. So we draw Mox Emerald, and we can't do anything this turn because the Emerald actually costs some mana through the Thorn. And at this point, our Lodestone Golem is going to bite the bullet to this Mishra's Factory that's going to block and turn himself into a 3/3. So I think in hindsight, maybe the attacking with the Golem wasn't really the smartest plan. Maybe waiting for him to tap out was slightly better, but again, it's really strange to not attack into Golem where we want to be aggressive against him, and he's content with just playing a land and passing the turn. He's still gaining value off of that, and we're not really gaining anything by not attacking. So I can see the argument for not attacking into the Lodestone Golem, knowing that it's just going to die to the Mishra's Factory. But I think I really wanted to try and push the envelope there. So fortunately for us, we actually drew a spell that could be cast. We didn't get a land. So we just fire off Jace blindly. Our opponent has run out of lands, which is nice. So we have a couple of plans here, or options. We could have played the Wasteland and played Metalworker, which obviously is kind of a strong play. But I wanted to get him off of lands and allow us to start attacking with the Revoker. Unfortunately, you notice I didn't attack with the Revoker, and that's going to come back to haunt us because the lag was such that I thought that I was attacking. I hit F2 for OK to initiate the combat step, and as I did that, he became stopped attacking, and I didn't attack with them. But you'll see in a couple of turns how much of a significant factor that was in this match. So our opponent played a Wasteland, and at this point I think it was safer to play Metalworker, because if they Wasteland one of our lands now, they're still behind the 8-ball. So I think it was a little bit safer to play the Metalworker then. And so this time I actually attack with the Revoker. Our opponent finds another land to our detriment and is able to play the Lightning Bolt on our Metalworker. So apparently he's not worried about the Revoker yet, but he is worried about the Metalworker because, rightfully so, we've got some cards here where we can actually do some damage. So we draw another Thorn of Amethyst, but it's not really worth playing at this point. Trying to keep them off of mana is more important, so I destroy his Volcanic Island and continue to attack with Revoker. At this point he should be at 6 health and not 8, so he finds another land, unfortunately for us. So we draw Mox Ruby, which still is not really going to get us too far. And at this point our opponent kind of ambushes us with this Snapcaster Mage on our Revoker. So you'll note he should be at 5 life, but he's at 7, and now we are kind of stuck without any threats on the board again. Opponent doesn't draw a land, but we also do not draw a land. So at this point, I play the Thorn of Amethyst simply because we really don't have anything better to do. Our opponent finds another land again. His deck has a ton of land in it, so it's not really surprising. And we go through a dry spell here where we don't really draw enough lands. We draw some lands, but not enough to actually matter. We can't cast any of either of the 2 3-drops that we have because of the Thorn of Amethyst, since they're not creatures. And so we go a few turns here where we kind of go through him drawing and playing into a land, and us drawing more stuff that we can't cast. So now at this point, this is where the game really starts to turn. So he ran out of Volcanic Islands, so he's left with just playing Steam Vents for dual lands. And he has, under 2 Thorns, he had to play the Steam Vents untapped this turn. But because he was at 3 life instead of 1, he was able to play the Steam Vents untapped and was able to cast Standstill. He would not have been able to cast Standstill that turn if we had attacked him like we had intended and he was at 1 life instead of 3. And now we're in a position where the Standstill is going to let him draw out of any threat, and he pretty much has the game locked up. He plays Fairy Conclave, so he has his win condition. So at this point, we just have to try and do something. So he draws presumably one or more counterspells off of the Standstill. This is another one of those weird quirks. I don't understand for the life of me why you can get mana drain mana off of a spell that is uncounterable, because we had Cavern of Souls named on Construct. You don't counter the spell, yet somehow you get the mana. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess it's because it doesn't say if the spell is countered, you get the mana. It just says you get the mana and counter the spell. So I guess the wording is such that it doesn't have to be countered in order to get the mana. I kind of think that's a little ridiculous, but that's the way the card works. But that allowed him to play a Jace. He also had a library, and at this point the game is pretty much over. So I'm just going to let you watch the next couple of turns as they happen. Nothing special really happens. I play another Metalworker, but it just gets bounced. And yeah, basically at this point I'm unable to really do anything. So the really unfortunate thing about Standstill decks are that they are hideously slow. The luck is such that the game takes forever. At least with workshop decks, when they lock you out, the game is effectively over fairly quickly. But with standstill decks, they take their sweet time trying to get to the point. So I'm just going to let you watch what happens. There's really nothing of note here yet. He's just controlling the top of our library with Fate Sealing, preventing us from drawing the lands that we need, and taking up Jace to its ultimate. I mean, at this point I thought it was a little excessive to not be attacking. There's no reason to do so. I can't play anything. He should be attacking instead of leaving these 3 lands up to play Crucible of Worlds, but it is what it is. So he finally gets Jace ultimated, and now we're on a really short clock, and he finally starts to attack here. At this point, I'm just furiously hitting F6 to save time, hoping that might work out in my favor later on. So we finally are dead on turn, what turn is this? 25. Turn 25, we're finally dead. Alright, on to game 2. Okay, for game 2, this is our opening hand. It isn't very attractive, but it will work. So we lead out with a Chalice of the Void on 1. That wasn't really necessarily like the most important thing, but at this point he drops a turn 1 standstill, and that is really hard to get out of. Because our deck doesn't have Mishra's Factories or anything like that, so that there's nothing that we can do to prevent the standstill from ever going off, and so we're kind of forced to do something to break the standstill. So we draw Mox Sapphire, and that's enough for me to decide to break it. We play the Sapphire, play a Wasteland, get rid of his Volcanic Island, and play Staff of Domination. Unfortunately, his second turn involved him playing a Wasteland and a Null Rod, turning off our ability to do anything with either the Sapphire or the Staff of Domination. And at this point, effectively the game is actually over, believe it or not. There's not a whole lot of things that we can do, especially when he plays Library of Alexandria on turn 3. And we don't have enough mana to cast either of the spells in our hand. We did draw the Tellurian Academy, which allowed us to play the duplicate. I played the duplicate first, hoping that maybe he would spend a counterspell on it. He doesn't have the ability to mana drain anything yet, so he would have had to use the Force of Will. I guess in hindsight, maybe the Wormcoil Engine would have been a smarter plan. But I didn't want to play the Wormcoil Engine first, get that countered, and then play a measly little duplicate and get stuck with that. So I guess in hindsight, the Wormcoil Engine would have been better, because now he has the ability to play Mana Drain. And that's exactly what he does. He Mana Drains our Wormcoil Engine. So we've got a duplicate that has to pretty much try and get there. And he ends up using the ridiculous mana that he got off of Mana Draining the Wormcoil Engine to hardcast Pulverize. He didn't even have to sacrifice his 2 lands. So that effectively ended the game, because our hand is empty. His hand is full with the Library of Alexandria and 2 land creatures, man lands, and the standstill pretty much ends the game. So much like last game, I'll just let the string play out. But it was a disappointing finish for our deck. The standstill matchup isn't really that great for the deck. There's not enough lock pieces for it to really work out in our favor, even though we did win the die roll. Actually, I think we lost the die roll here. So we take a few swings from the manlands, and that is the match. I think if I was to play a workshop deck in a future tournament, it would probably be more lock focused, with Sphere of Resistances, four main deck Sphere of Resistance, at least 3 Thorn of Amethysts, maybe Smokestack. I'm not 100% sure, but definitely much more of a prison style deck as opposed to this combo style deck. You'll notice that in none of the games was I in any position to even come close to using Kuldotha Forgemaster as a Tinker bot. I don't know if I was playing the games wrong, if the hands never presented themselves correctly, or what. But I do feel that after 10 games, if the main strategy of your deck never even comes to fruition, and it doesn't even happen once, or even become a threat to happen at any point in any of those 10 games, I think that's a large enough sample size to indicate that it probably isn't a very smart plan. And we'll look to do a little bit better in the next event. So thanks for watching.